Well, I'm here for lesson number 2, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that we won't be going up today. Now this is what you would call Instrument Meteorological Conditions, or IMC for short. Now this kind of weather is not something I ever want to fly in. And it's not something we will be flying in because we can't see anything, which is a bit of a shame. I was a bit excited to be coming up for my second lesson, but it is not going to happen. Hopefully there'll be some ground school today, but we most certainly will not be going up into those skies. Yes, as anticipated, we're not going anywhere in the sky today. And if you look that way, you'll see why. The visibility, well, there is none. I'm doing 30 miles per hour and that is too fast. So let me slow down a little bit. So yeah, this is something we're gonna have to put up with, particularly this time of year in this country. So it's January, nearly January, sorry. And this weather happens all the time, particularly at the elevation of Compton Abbas. So I just need to accept this. So, you know, it's not a great loss. I'll just go home, I'll read a few more books, and I'll do a bit more flight simming. I know, you know, it's not a perfect substitute, but it's better than nothing. God, this guy's right on my backside. I might just pull over and let him go. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing, but you've kind of got to accept that when you're doing flying lessons, you are a total slave to the weather. Now, if we go back to what I was talking about at Compton, about VFR and IFR, so the LAPL license I'm doing is VFR only. I can't actually get instrument rated on a LAPL license. So when I do get the license, I'll only ever be able to fly under visual flight rules, which means I've got to be able to see the ground at all times. I mean, you are taught how to escape from a cloud, because that is one of the biggest killers of pilots. Is flying from visual flight rules into instrument flight rules. And I read some terrifying statistic. You've got like 90 seconds to live if you fly into these kind of conditions, if you're a VFR pilot, which is somewhat terrifying. I finished Stick and Rudder and it was an awesome book. Awesome, really loved it, and I learned so much from that, and I can thoroughly recommend it. I'm going to read it again, and I'll probably read it 3 times because it's so much to take in. But definitely, if you're new to flying or thinking of flying, get that book, read all about it. Now I've gone on to a different book called The Killing Zone. Yes, it really is as morbid as it sounds, by a chap called Paul Craig, I think his name is. I may be wrong. I'll put a link down in the description box below. Paul Craig, and this is talking about what kills pilots, and the killing zone refers to the number of hours a pilot has, and the killing zone is a pilot with between 50 and 350 hours of flying behind them. So most accidents, fatal accidents, occur between 50 and 350 hours, which is slightly disturbing if I'm being honest. So the reason I bought this book is I kind of want to know what dangers are out there for me. Now I'm pretty sure my instructor is going to tell me all this. Now this is a hideous junction. particularly in these conditions, because we've got a blind corner on my right, and I've got a car coming straight ahead, so I'll let him go. And I've got to just hope and pray no cars come around that corner fast. Okay, cool. We survived. Dun, da, da. Yeah, so going back to the killing zone. Now I've only got up to, just finished chapter 2, just starting chapter 3. Now chapters 1 and 2, bit of fluff, if I'm being honest. It's more about the author spouting out his credentials and experience, which I suppose isn't a bad thing, but you don't actually get to the nitty-gritty of the book until chapter 3, which I've just started. And in fact, the first part of that chapter is talking about VFR pilots flying into IMC conditions, and just what happens in those conditions, and how your body is fooled into which direction the plane is turning, and you become spatially disorientated very, very quickly. I mean, frighteningly so. I mean, it's no exaggeration when they talk about you're dead in 90 seconds. It's that serious. Now, this chapter's also posted examples of actual real life scenarios which took place, sadly all fatal. And when you read these examples, you think to yourself, how on earth did this person put themselves in that position? I mean, we all know how dangerous it is to fly into IMC conditions, so why do people do it? Or they I can't remember what they call it, is it scud running? Perhaps somebody can correct me, but someone who will fly below the clouds and just get lower and lower and lower, just trying to stay out of the clouds till ultimately they fly into a hill or something. And I read all these scenarios, and some of them, you know, are so sad. Their families with them, their children, and they put them in this situation where it's almost certain death. It's quite terrifying. And you think, what is the process in the brain which makes that pilot do that chain of events which ultimately leads to them dying and all those in the plane dying too? And some of these are quite experienced pilots. I mean, it's not, the killing zone is mainly, as I say, between 50 hours and 350 hours of flying. But, you know, there's pilots with, you know, over 1,000 hours doing exactly the same thing. And I just can't get my head round it. You know, there has been talk of this I've heard this term, get there-itis, where you've got to get somewhere at a certain time because it's so important, and because of that you'll plough on no matter what. And I think to myself, is anything really that important, particularly if you've got your family, you know, your children with you? And what on earth could be so important to put yourself at that much risk? I mean, do they not realise the risk that they're going into? And this is the reason I'm reading all these books. You know, I do a lot of motorcycling, and I know how dangerous that can be for different reasons. But all those risks can be mitigated. And I just can't imagine the thought process which puts you in that kind of scenario. And that's what scares me, because this happens a lot. Yeah, this is the biggest killer in general aviation. You know, you don't have to worry so much about engine failures on takeoff, although it does happen. Mechanical failure is rare, but the biggest killer is VFR into IMC conditions. And every pilot knows this. So what's going on psychologically here? And this is what scares me a lot, because if it can happen to guys with 200, 300, 400, 500 hours or more, over 1,000 hours, if it can happen to that kind of pilot with that much experience, knowing what they do, that must mean I am vulnerable to that scenario. There is a chain of events which happens and I can be in exactly the same spot. And that's slightly terrifying, I've got to be honest. I sit here now, driving very slowly around these very tight roads. I sit here now knowing that flying into clouds or poor conditions is very bad. And I sit here now and I swear I'll never do it. But you know what? I'm pretty sure these other pilots had exactly the same conversations with themselves. So that's what scares me. So I'm kind of hoping this book will tell me how to break that chain of bad decisions, how to identify when things are starting to go wrong and to abort. And that's what I'm hoping, because that does worry me a lot. On the plus side, my main worries when I first started thinking about flying was mechanical failures. You know, what if the wing falls off? You know, what if the engine cuts out? Or even more serious, what if the engine cuts out on takeoff? And if you look at the statistics, very rare scenarios, very rare. I think, I don't want to quote any statistics on the fly, but I will. I think crashes with engine failures on takeoff account for about 7%. So it's not a huge amount. I mean, we're talking a low amount of accidents altogether, so 7% isn't a lot. And mechanical failures as well in the air, very rare in comparison to VFR into IMC conditions. So that reassured me. You know, these planes are built really well and very tough, and you have to do a lot to have a catastrophic failure of the aircraft, which can happen when you fly into IMC conditions. You know, because your body is totally confused what to do with the stick, the rudder. You can put so much energy into the wings they can literally snap off. It is a frightening topic, and one you should definitely educate yourself about. And the other most common accident is stall and spin at low altitude. Now, it was touched on this in Stick and Rudder, and I haven't read anything about it. I've just started a chapter now, which is just starting to go on to that scenario. But this is where the pilot is flying slowly, turns too much, and the bottom wing stalls, spin, and they don't have enough altitude to recover. And that is another common accident. So that's the next thing I'm going to be reading about. So that's it for this video. So it's been a short one. If we look forward, we'll see that the sky is clearing, but it's too late for me, unfortunately. My lesson was supposed to start 10 minutes ago, and what a shame. But anyway, not to worry, not to worry. Going back to the first video, the disappointment of no video. So I still haven't figured out the cause of the battery running flat while still in the camera. What I've done this morning, I charged it up last night, took the battery out, and I've just placed it back in to make this video. But I've also got a massive, great big battery pack which I can link up via cable. Now I have heard that these fusions do overheat after about an hour unless you keep the battery door open. So I'll have the main battery, the big battery pack, linked to the fusion, keep the battery door open with the battery out, and then hopefully we'll be fine. Also noticed in the last video the sound's pretty naff coming straight from the fusion there, particularly outside when it's windy. So I got myself one of these lav mics, and that is currently going into my smartphone to record, and then I've just got to do a bit of syncing up in Final Cut Pro. Right, well look, the clouds are clearing. Teasing me it is. Curse you, clouds. And I'll see you on the next one.